I don't know.
Is that a cat?
Yeah.
It's Cracker.
Is that
Kitty Petters Union.
Kitty Petters Union. We get to show a Kitty Petters Union. We got to record the cat. The cat's got to be on air when we record. That is a nice, beautiful, big cat.
His name is Cracker. Black cat named Cracker. We actually have 4 cats.
I thought that's what she was trying to allude to.
Yeah.
Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Clint Macro. Brought to you by Public Safety and Education and the Trigger Pressers Union. And now, your hosts.
Welcome to Meet the Pressers. My name is Clint Macro, and this is my co-host,
Matt Mallory. And we have a very special guest tonight, Kerry Slone.
This episode of Meet the Pressers is made possible with the generous support of the lawofselfdefense.com, Nikon, Shooter Technology Group, ASP, Saber Red, the Safer, Faster Defense Responder 2.0, and Lee Armory. Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Miss Slone? I know we just recently met. We just became friends on the internet, which I'm glad to have met you and hear your speech at the Second Amendment rally, which was phenomenal. So tell us a little bit more about your background, where you're from, what really got you into firearms, and what's your passion.
Well, thanks a lot. And, since we are friends on Instagram now, that aren't we like BFFs, right? Because that's the way that goes, right? We're automatically BFFs on there. So, I don't be hating. Somebody's jealous over there in the corner. I'm not, let me preface this. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Any opportunity I have to have this voice heard, because I tend to bring a little bit more of a unique conversation to gun rights. And ultimately the right to bear arms, which is not just guns. And for me, it is truly about the passion of what I'm doing with this. Because if I wanted to be, Instagram famous, I'd just put a cat with a rifle on the internet and that would be it. So it's really more about my mission, which is last year, I live in Washington State, and I spoke out about, I'm sure if you're gun people at all listening to this, and I would assume that you are, not that I should make assumptions, but you're familiar with Initiative 1639 here in Washington State, because it made national news. It passed significantly, and it is considered one of the strictest gun control laws in the country that was written. Well, in that law, of the many, many things that were in that law that I could go in, and we would need much more than 30 minutes to discuss, the one that really concerned me the most was the section of it that talks about the background checks. Now, when you make a purchase of a firearm in Washington State, it's an automatic waiver of your medical record yeah, exactly. So for they to do a background check on you, and by background check I mean your mental health record. And there's no, people are sometimes they lose track of the fact that it's not how a law is written, it's how it's not written. Mm-hmm. That is actually exactly, it's how it's a bigger threat to our constitutional rights, or just human rights in general. And because there's no criteria or structure in how that is written, it's the ability to search through your medical records is completely arbitrary and based on the medical health authority of whoever that is, right? So they can go back as far as they want to look. They can look at anything. There's no criteria for what they will approve or deny. It's literally very based on right. So I am a domestic violence survivor. Who has always been a pretty hardline constitutionalist, and particularly for the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms and the right of self-defense, and that understanding how, as a domestic violence survivor, doing what I was supposed to do, which was get the healthcare, the mental health care that I needed. I have PTSD on my medical record now. Mm-hmm. Well, PTSD, as we know in the quote unquote gun culture, is a hot button term and mental health issue for for red flag laws and gun confiscation or denial of purchase of a firearm. So I think it's it was in 2006. So what, 13 years ago was my diagnosis, but there's no criteria saying how far back they're going to look.
Right.
You know, I went through the treatment to get the treatment I needed. But, you know, at this point, I just recently was able to purchase a rifle, but that doesn't mean that my next one can't be, you know, denied, because there is no criteria. Now, granted, the more it goes on, the less, but then, I mean, they can still deny it, but then I'm in a position to have to challenge it. Right. So I'm still under the thing. You know, medications, you know, depression, anxiety, there's all of these things that can negatively impact the purchase, which then of course roll into red flag laws, which is a whole other issue with how that works and stuff. And my daughter's come home. So that's another concern on top of all that. So we're sitting in a situation now where not only with this law here in Washington State, but what is brought to the conversation about ERPO, extreme risk protection orders. For those of you not familiar, that's like the technical fancy term, the legal term for red flag laws. There's a lot of issues that are very concerning for me as a domestic violence survivor, for other domestic violence victims and survivors who may still be in their situation or are just trying to get out, where they can have the firearms, you know, in Washington State, if there's a domestic disturbance call, regardless of who it's from, and regardless of what the outcome of the call is, all firearms are removed from the home.
Yeah.
So regardless of who the owner is, so that's a problem. That's putting domestic violence survivors and victims in a position to not be able to be armed when they need to be. And that's a concern. Other concerns is that those types of laws will be used against domestic violence survivors or victims. You know, it's the leverage tool. You know, if you try to leave me, I'm going to call you in. You know, kind of a thing.
Yep.
But I could go on with many other reasons, but one of them that for me is a big concern, and I've actually spoken with Michael Sedini from Walk the Talk America about this because it's a concern, is now we're also sitting in a position where victims may not go get the health care that they need, mental health care that they need, for fear of having something on their records to be denied. You know, since my episode, I suffer from severe insomnia, and I can't take, you know, Ambien. You know, because a lot of those, or similar types of medications, because they're often classified under the antidepressant category or whatever. So it's that's putting people at risk, and that concerns me greatly. So I spoke out about that last year, and several people tagged Colin Noir in the post. And a year later, I'm speaking in Washington D.C. about the dangers of gun control on domestic violence victims. The reason that I made that ascension, I think, so quickly is because nobody is talking about this. I mean, we had a lot of amazing speakers on that stage. But not one, you know, we talked about women or this or that, but not one single person talked about specifically about domestic violence and those issues. And while I've brought forward people that are domestic violence victims and sharing their stories, particularly men, which is interesting, and I'm super blessed to feel that I've given that lane to men. I mean, that's a big deal to me. That they can feel that they're coming out about their abuse, because 1 in 7 men are abused. 1 in 3 to 4 women, depending on the study, and 1 in 7 men, that I've given them that lane, you know, to be able to speak in, but nobody's actually still taking that advocacy torch at that, you know, and speaking on it very vocally. And I get it. Why? I mean, some people will tell me, yeah, I'll share my story with you. And then they never do. And some of it's because they legitimately are still in hiding and can't, or they're afraid, or some of it is just, it's just too, you know, I mean, you heard my speech. I mean, some of it is just too emotional, you know, to talk about. And for me, it wasn't the actual act, right, in the speech. That was, you know, telling you the details. I've had to go through that so many times, but it's actually the gravity of knowing the responsibility that sits on me now, to be able to be this voice and to make sure that voice is heard and heard properly.
It takes a lot of courage. So
Thank you.
Definitely commend you for that.
Thanks. So We the Female was actually started as my retirement plan at 50, and was something I had already planned to do is outreach for women in some capacity. I just didn't know what it necessarily looked like at that point. I knew I wanted to work with domestic violence victims in some way. And it actually originally my thought was I'm an entrepreneur and real estate investors was my day job. Part of it, well, I guess it's still kind of there. I mean, I still have that, but I thought, maybe I'll give microloans to women who successfully go through transition programs or whatever. And this was kind of where I was going with it. And then I began to realize, even before I spoke out against 1639, when I started grassroots trying to fight against this in my state before everything blew up, that there was a need to educate women in how not to be victims to begin with. Right. So what does that look like? How do we, I throw this number out there, not that there's some solid statistic, but the reality is probably 95%, if not more, of situations that we would have to be able to use a self-defense tool, whether it be a gun, a knife, or whatever. Chances are you could probably get yourself out of them by paying attention with defensive mindset and situational awareness. So We the Female actually teaches that. And we go into different states and we teach these classes, which the benefit is that for most states, if you add whatever the individual state's laws are regarding gun laws, it ends up working as a CCW class, which is kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Along with that reinforcement of let's not use it to begin with if we don't have to.
Right.
But along with that, we kind of cover what options before, what the pros and cons of each option is for self-defense. Along with your rights and responsibilities, particularly around gun use, firearms, if you have to execute that. Because to me, it's not, I absolutely am a shall not be infringed person. And there's no shall not be infringed, but we should not be infringed. I do understand, however, they're going to infringe regardless. So we need to be proactive in the gun culture and as gun owners, even and including those individuals that are not in gun culture, right? Because a lot of people in the gun culture forget that the majority of gun owners are not in the gun community or gun culture. I owned guns prior. I didn't know there was a culture till a year ago. I'm like, holy crap. Like there's a whole world of these people that think like this. And y'all like, some of y'all like, woohoo, man.
They're different.
Like
Listen,
they shower with their gun, they sleep with their gun. I don't see a problem with that.
Not only have I become advocate, for domestic violence victims to be able to have the right to choose how they defend themselves and to not have their ability to own a gun infringed upon because of a mental health issue. But I've also found myself inadvertently an advocate kind of within the culture itself to kind of be like, yo, we kind of need to stop calling names and get in the lanes of, to bring these lanes together. I'm like, we're all going in the same direction on the highway, right? Why are some of y'all trying to do U-turns?
That was the whole point of my organization, the Trigger Pressers Union. It doesn't matter what your given usage of a firearm is, what your background is. If you use a firearm for legal and righteous purpose, then we need to support everyone else because we all press triggers.
Exactly. And I love that. And I love that concept because it doesn't matter. I'm, being a hardline constitutionalist, I despise greatly political parties. And I mean, even libertarian, like I'm not even libertarian, I just, our founding fathers did not intend for us to have political parties. And,
I agree.
And we are set up to not have political parties. That was the whole point.
Yep.
And so I'm big on the, no, we need to get off that. And people need to understand that liberal and conservative do not mean Democrat you can have liberal Republicans. You can have conservative Democrats. Like they're not mutually exclusive. So we need to stop that partisanship stuff. And that's a big one. And one of the big things, I like to say this, and put this out there, because I think one of the things that's frustrating is like that one of the things that was glorious about that rally was that we literally saw that, right? Everybody of all these different walks of life came together. Everybody put not only their political and partisanship, attitudes to the side, but also like, the individuals that had issues with each, I did not know that there were people that were on that stage that were not fans of each other.
Right.
And everybody put it to the side and it was cool. Right. I mean, that was amazing. And so my point with this, and I tell people all the time, particularly in I do a lot of live streaming and stuff, is look, we say these things, but then some of y'all, and I've got to call out the conservative, Republicans on this, they tend to be the worst typically, is you guys come in and you leave these comments like, well, that effing libtard and, these stinking, snowflakes. I'm like, so it's not standing on the stage and saying that you believe we should all stand together. Yeah. It's when you decide you're behind your keyboard and nobody can see who you are and you're making that comment that liberal snowflake sees that, and they may be following me because I've given them that lane to feel comfortable to say, hey, she accepts me, even though I may not agree completely with her.
Right.
But she's going to support my right of the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
But then they see that, and now they're reluctant to come forward. So I think it's really important that we understand that as gun people, who we do, the culture tends to pull conservative. I mean, I think that's safe to say. Mm-hmm. But we need to understand that we are just as accountable for the language that we use as conservatives as the liberal, everybody,
Sure.
blames liberal. And they can tend to get a little inflamed. I mean, I'm not denying that. And they can be buttholes too. But conservatives get a little bit of a self-righteous attitude when they're leaving those comments. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are literally inhibiting those people. And we're going to need those people.
Yeah, I was just going to say that part of that demographic, part of that pie, if you will, has to come from the other side. Right. That without that, it's going to be split down the middle or a little bit one way or the other. You got to keep, right. Like in law enforcement, we say you got to keep 51% control. If you don't have 51% control of the situation, then you're losing, and you've got a lot of tools on your belt that they can get access to, and that's not a losing battle you want. So, if
exactly.
in order to win the Second Amendment battle, we have to come together on an even ground and talk about that and put the other things aside so that we can keep our right to bear arms, our right to defend ourselves from bad guys and from a tyrannical government.
Hi, I'm Grant Gallagher from Scottsshot in New Jersey. I'm the co-administrator of National Trainer Teacher Day, and you're watching Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Clint Macro.
Meet the Pressers.
We have this whole package of rights that's guaranteed to us, so
right.
You are an American. If you're a citizen, you're American. You have rights that are available to you, and you should exercise them and enjoy them.
They wrote the Bill of Rights 3 years after the Constitution. Well, it was 3 years before it was ratified. Mm-hmm. Because they had to go out to all the states and everybody's in their pissing. Blah, 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 what does it say, right? There was a reason that they placed number one. And there's a reason they placed number two. And the joke in our house is that the ugly stepchild is number 3, right? That, a lot of people don't even know what that is. But when they executed, when before America was America, we had Second Amendment. And the reason we have Second Amendment is because they took our arms, and number 3 happened because of that, right? And and you had these soldiers taking over, literally taking our land and our homes and everything. So people like that would never happen. I'm like, but there's a reason it's 3, and you it seems we're very detached from that now. But you bet your sweet ass that it would happen if that's the case. And even if it's in the metaphor of the state will take your property, right? I mean, because if it may not be like a soldier or quartering a soldier specifically, but I think that would extend to any sort of state taking your
eminent domain
property. Eminent domain, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I kind of geek out about that kind of stuff and understanding the multiple layers and facets of why it's important to understand all of the amendments and why they were placed where they were placed.
That's a rabbit hole I like to go down quite often.
Oh, I could go on for hours about that. Like, it's my favorite thing. And I'm reading a really cool book about it right now about like the women's impact on it. And people would be blown away because women actually pushed. See, you guys got me started. Women were the impetus for actually us going into war. And people don't realize that because, everybody thinks it was a Tea Party and then the shot heard around the world. Yeah, but it was actually women who stopped buying the goods, right? We stopped buying the tea. We started making our own fabric. We put the economic squeeze on England. And this book I'm reading now, which is a really cool book, it's called Revolutionary Mothers. And it actually, there's transcripts of letters in there from Englishmen writing back to their loyalist family members in the colonies, saying, or do women have a voice in Congress now, right? Because women became very effective propagandists at this point, and even sometimes anonymously. But the cool part, this is one of my favorite things, is this letter in particular. This guy says, so essentially, I'm going to paraphrase it. If we're this scared of the men and these women get involved, we're in deep shit. I mean, that's basically what this letter from this Englishman says. Is he's like, man, if we fear the men, the women are trouble. And he refers to them as like these Amazonian kind of, it's pretty cool actually. They use domestic violence victims as a pawn for gun control.
Yep.
So, and I think it's safe to say that while there are men and they, right, because I'm very inclusive about that, that are also affected by domestic violence, it's the primary marketed anti-gun message is at women, right? Yeah. So they're literally using women and oppressing women's voice and perpetuating and encouraging victimhood and victimization and dependency on the state. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they know that we have that much power to speak out, and that, when I say the future of the Second Amendment is in women's hands, that's legitimate. And if we can literally go back to the founding of this country now, and we have proof that men were scared of women speaking up and stepping up. And I'm in the process of writing a whole thing about this, and my husband's like, you should write a book. And I'm like, maybe I will. So, because there's connections there that people aren't making.
Definitely.
And but I'm working on an article now about that. But yeah, so I'm convinced now that these people, and I won't just say Democrats, because while they are the Democratic Party, is typically more guilty of it. Make no mistake, there's Republicans out there that are full support. Dan Crenshaw, I'm talking to you. Lindsey Graham, I'm talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, Trump-ish, like depending on the day. Like y'all are using women. Like y'all are oppressing women, and that's not cool. And if I have my way, I'm going to piss them off enough and make them realize that you're using them for your agenda.
I'm Laura Parks, Marketing and Membership Manager for the National Muzzleloading Rifle Association here in beautiful Friendship, Indiana. And today you are watching Meet the Pressers with Clint Macro and Matt Mallory.
Meet the Pressers.
I like to teach feminism. I really like to use colonial women through history. Abigail Adams being my favorite. My everyday carry firearm is named after her. And because she was probably, arguably, America's first feminist. She was darkly at the time called Mrs. President, because she had so much influence over John Adams and the impact that she had about making sure that women were given as much rights as they could for the time and the culture that it was in. Yeah.
Push the envelope.
Yeah, she did. And in her own way, and talked, even in letters to her, not just John, right? Everybody, most of the history we have of our American Revolution is actually in the letters that she and John wrote back and forth to each other, which is, I'm grateful we have those, again, a woman that did that. But, she even letters to her nieces and things about, how she just doesn't think that it's proper that a woman should be treated differently because of her sex. And so she was quite the progressive thinker for 200 and something years ago. So you need to understand the multiple layers of why everything happened the way it did with American history, to understand and value the right to bear arms, not just guns, but the right to bear arms, any and all means necessary of self-defense of yourself, your family, your property, and your communities against tyrannical government. And that's you need to understand where we came from to get to where we are.
Indeed.
Most definitely. Very well said.
Thank you.
Well, tell us your website, or how people can get in touch with you and follow you and do all that stuff.
So wethefemale.net is where you can find me, and you can actually, if you do a $35 donation over there, I send you one of our t-shirts, and they're cool because I'm really a t-shirty snob. I was in the fashion and beauty industry before this, so I'm very particular about. I own a day spa, so I still do. Yeah, so that's a big thing. Other than, I do have some YouTube. Clearly, it's obviously not my lane. My primary lane where everything got shared is Instagram. It's the Letters and Shotguns. It's my personal. That was my personal account that became a brand accidentally.
That's what mine did.
Never the intention.
PS&Ed was the same way. My Instagram was just personal, and then I'm like, turn it into the business one.
Yeah, and mine just evolved that way. Like, I've got a patch coming out. I'll send you guys one. I'm super excited.
Cool. That's really cool.
Coming. Yeah. So, and it's become a brand, and with the ability to monetize everything that I do through that, through the 100% of anything that goes through that goes to We the Female, which is a 501c3. So any donations that are made to it go there. There is a GoFundMe for it, and a Patreon as well, that people can donate to.
Cool.
But I did just partner with Brownells.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, I've seen a lot of the Brownell stuff on you when you're, shirt the other day, hat today.
Yeah, so Brownells has partnered with me, and so for those of you that will be listening to this here in the next week or so, Brownells has just generously donated a sporting scope from Loophole, and a Trigicon RMR green dot for me to raffle off for when you donate to We the Female. So that's going to be coming. Cool. Yeah, and this is a long-term thing, so this is something we're going to be working on together. But those are places that you can find me and interact with me. I'm pretty good about returning most messages on Facebook isn't my best, Facebook Messenger, but the DMs on Instagram, I try my best to get that out there. And that's probably going to be the best way to contact me.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. And if we can be of any service or help you with getting your message out there, please don't hesitate to call upon us.
Have a great night.
All right. Good night.
Thanks. You as well. Bye.
We have a lot of sponsors that made this show possible.
Make sure you check them out and give them your business.
This episode of Meet the Pressers is made possible with the generous support of the lawofselfdefense.com, Nikon, Shooter Technology Group, ASP, Saber Red, the Safer, Faster Defense Responder 2.0, and Lee Armory. Thank you.
This is my new Lee Armory Classic AK, and this will be the first 20 rounds I ever shoot through it. There it is.
Nike goes boom. Swish goes boom. Getting it ready. The swoosh is what's gonna go boom. 2 pounds should do it. One side. .258 yards. First shot. So here is the explosion location. There's literally just pieces, little bitty pieces here and there. Looks like that's the cap to one of the cans. And pieces of Nike bag here and there. Little piece up in there. It's here. It's here. There. Big piece there. I guess I need to burn it. Throw it in a pile and burn it now. That's about it. Piece-wise. Just a little bit of scraps. It looks like a napalm bomb went off right there, doesn't it? Crazy. How you like them apples? Yeah, baby.
Dick, it's time to look at the news. You got your start as a newscaster, didn't you?
Yes, indeed I did, back in
Back in the Middle Ages.
Utica, New York.
Utica.
Now, you're kidding, but it was really sort of like the Middle Ages, because today the news is very sophisticated, computerized, very smooth stuff.
Well, not always. On some days, it's like a trip back to the Middle Ages. Watch this.
Hello and welcome to Meet the Pressers. I'm Matt Mallory, and this is my co-host, Clint Macro.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thanks for the bump. Our show is what is our show? I don't even know what it is. Go ahead.
It's late at night. Our show is about firearms, self-defense. We do an occasional gear review.
I'm not going to keep that. Let's run that again.
Oh, okay. I thought you were trying to be a funny outtake, right?
Yeah, well,
Our show is
that's
about f***ing up at midnight.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after this.
Now, back to Meet the Pressers.
Thanks for watching the show.
Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and click that little bell to make sure you know when our next episode's uploaded.
Until next time,
adieu.
Thank you for watching Meet the Pressers.